Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The morning the fashion empire truly began didn't come with fireworks or champagne popping in some glittering boardroom. It arrived quietly, almost deceptively so, with Katie Logan standing alone in her modest yet sunlit office, staring out at Los Angeles as if the city itself were daring her to take the leap. And in that stillness she finally admitted what she'd been circling for months, that this wasn't just about leaving Forrester Creations or proving anything to Bill or Brooke or anyone else. It was about reclaiming a part of herself she tucked away for years, the sharp-minded businesswoman who once helped build empires instead of living in their shadows. And as that realization settled, Katie turned back to her desk, opened her laptop, and began making calls that would quietly shake the fashion world to its core. Because when Katie Logan decides to build something, she does it with intention, heart, and an unspoken promise that she won't compromise who she is to get there. And the first call went to a designer she'd crossed paths with years ago during a chaotic international launch, someone brilliant, volatile, and fiercely loyal once earned. And when that designer heard Katie's calm, confident voice explain the vision, not just numbers or branding but a company built on integrity, inclusion, and innovation, there was a pause, then a soft laugh, and finally a simple, "I'm listening," which was all Katie needed to hear to know this was real. And from there the momentum built fast, almost startlingly so, because word travels quickly in the fashion industry when someone with Katie's reputation steps out on her own. And soon her phone buzzed nonstop with names that had once seemed untouchable, pattern makers from Milan tired of toxic leadership, sustainability experts from New York who wanted their work to mean something, young prodigies burned by cutthroat houses that chewed them up before they'd even found their voice. And Katie listened to every story, not rushing them, not promising miracles, just offering honesty and a chance to build something better together. And that sincerity became her secret weapon, because unlike the polished power plays of Forrester Creations, this was personal, raw, and refreshingly human. And as the days passed, the small office transformed into a hive of energy with fabric samples draped over chairs, sketches pinned haphazardly to walls, and voices overlapping in passionate debate. And Katie thrived in the chaos, moving through it with a steady hand and a clear vision, mediating creative clashes with grace, encouraging bold risks while anchoring them in smart strategy, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, a new culture took shape, one where credit was shared, ideas were protected, and no one was afraid to speak up. And it didn't take long for Brooke to notice, because Brooke Logan has always had an instinct for seismic shifts in the fashion world. And when she stopped by unannounced one afternoon, expecting perhaps a modest startup and instead walked into a room buzzing with elite talent she recognized from global runways, her smile froze for just a second before softening into something more complex, pride tangled with surprise and a flicker of concern, because Brooke knew exactly what this meant, for Forrester Creations, for Ridge, and for the delicate balance of power they'd all grown accustomed to. And Katie met her sister's gaze without apology, not defensive, not triumphant, just steady as if to say this wasn't a rebellion, it was an evolution. And Brooke, after a long beat, nodded, offering quiet support even as she understood the ripple effects would be impossible to contain. And those ripples reached Bill Spencer faster than anyone expected, because Bill has never been blind to opportunity or threat. And when his sources whispered that Katie wasn't just dabbling but assembling a dream team capable of challenging legacy houses, his initial reaction was disbelief followed swiftly by intrigue. And when he confronted Katie, expecting hesitation or uncertainty, he found instead a woman fully in her power, calmly laying out her plan without asking for his backing, without seeking validation. And that, more than anything, unsettled him, because Bill Spencer understands strength, and what he saw in Katie wasn't borrowed confidence. It was earned. And as their conversation ended without resolution, Bill was left watching her walk away, realizing he might be witnessing the birth of something he couldn't control. And back at the office, the designers Katie had recruited began to click into place like pieces of a long-awaited puzzle, collections forming that blended high fashion with accessibility, luxury with conscience, and innovation with emotional storytelling. And as prototypes emerged, the excitement became palpable, not just among the team but across the industry, with buyers requesting previews and journalists sniffing around for exclusives. And Katie, ever cautious yet optimistic, resisted the urge to rush, insisting they get it right rather than get it fast. And that patience paid off when a private showing brought hardened critics to stunned silence, garments speaking for themselves with craftsmanship and soul. And in that moment, as applause filled the room and her team exchanged stunned, emotional glances, Katie felt something shift deep inside her. Not relief, not vindication, but belonging, the sense that she was exactly where she was meant to be, building something that reflected her values and her resilience. And when the night finally wound down and the lights dimmed, Katie lingered alone once more, touching the fabric of a jacket that represented countless late nights, hard conversations, and fearless decisions, and she smiled, knowing this was only the beginning, because the fashion empire she was creating wasn't just about clothes or competition, it was about rewriting the narrative, proving that leadership could be kind without being weak, ambitious without being ruthless, and visionary without losing its soul. And as Los Angeles buzzed just outside her window, unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding within those walls, Katie Logan stood at the center of it all, not as someone stepping out of a famous name's shadow, but as a force in her own right, ready to redefine what power looks like in the world of fashion, one bold, beautiful choice at a time. As the weeks unfolded after that first private showing, the quiet revolution Katie had ignited refused to stay quiet, because momentum has a sound of its own in the fashion world. A low hum that grows into a roar before anyone can pretend it's just a passing trend. And Katie felt it every morning when she walked into the studio and saw her team already at work, coffee cups abandoned, sleeves rolled up, voices animated with ideas that bounced off one another like sparks. And what struck her most wasn't just the talent she'd gathered but the way they believed in her vision, not because she demanded loyalty or dazzled them with promises, but because she showed up every single day with clarity, consistency, and respect. And that belief became contagious, spreading outward until even suppliers and manufacturers started adjusting their schedules just to be part of what everyone was now calling Katie's company, even though she hadn't yet settled on a name, insisting they'd know it when it revealed itself, much like the identity of the brand itself, which was still evolving, still breathing, and still daring to be different in an industry that often punished originality. And as sketches turned into finished garments and finished garments turned into full collections, the conversations grew deeper, more strategic, touching on distribution models, ethical sourcing, and how to protect creative voices without diluting the business side. And Katie found herself leaning into those discussions with a confidence that surprised even her, because somewhere along the line, she stopped second-guessing herself and started trusting the instincts she'd honed through years of hard lessons, heartbreak, and resilience. And that shift didn't go unnoticed by those around her, especially her son Will, who watched his mother navigate this new chapter with a mixture of awe and pride, seeing her not just as the woman who'd always been there for him, but as a leader inspiring rooms full of adults twice his age. And when he asked her one evening if she was scared, Katie paused before answering honestly that she was terrified. But fear no longer meant stop to her. It meant proceed carefully, deliberately, and with purpose. And that honesty seemed to define her leadership style, one that valued transparency over bravado. And soon the brand's internal culture became its most powerful asset, drawing in even more top-tier talent who were tired of secrecy, manipulation, and credit stealing, and instead wanted to build something where their work mattered and their voices were heard. And as the team expanded, Katie made it a point to personally meet every new hire, learning not just their resumes but their stories, because she understood that people don't leave prestigious fashion houses lightly, they leave because something broke, and she wanted this place to feel like a repair rather than a replacement. And that philosophy began to reflect in the clothes themselves, pieces that told stories of strength, reinvention, and quiet confidence, garments that didn't scream for attention but commanded it all the same. And when early buzz leaked to the press despite their best efforts to stay under the radar, headlines started circulating about a mysterious new fashion house led by a familiar name. And suddenly Katie Logan was no longer just Brooke's sister or Bill Spencer's ex. She was a headline in her own right. And that shift sent shockwaves through Forrester Creations, where Rich couldn't help but study the leaked images with a mix of professional admiration and personal unease, recognizing the craftsmanship immediately, and knowing exactly how dangerous this could be to their dominance. Especially because it wasn't built on scandal or shock value but substance. And even Steffi, ever the fierce protector of the Forrester legacy, couldn't deny the quality of what she was seeing, though she worried about what it meant for the future, not just of the company but of the family ties that had always blurred the line between business and blood. And those worries came to a head when a major buyer quietly declined a Forrester preview in favor of requesting a meeting with Katie's team, move that felt less like competition and more like a declaration of shifting loyalty. And as tension simmered on all sides, Katie remained focused, refusing to be pulled into old rivalries or emotional power struggles, reminding herself and her team that this wasn't about tearing anything down. It was about building something new, something honest, and that resolve was tested when Bill returned, this time not as an observer but as a man wrestling with his own conflicted emotions, offering resources, connections, and capital under the guise of support, and Katie listened carefully, appreciating the gesture but setting firm boundaries, making it clear that while she welcomed collaboration, she would not surrender control or compromise her values, and Bill, unused to hearing no from her, realized in that moment just how much she'd changed, or perhaps how much she'd always been capable of changing, and though frustration flickered in his eyes, so did respect, because Bill Spencer recognizes a formidable opponent even when he loves them, and as their paths diverged once more, Katie felt lighter, unburdened by the need to prove herself to anyone but the people who had chosen to stand beside her, and that sense of alignment carried them into their first major public reveal, a carefully curated event that rejected the usual glitz in favor of intimacy, inviting select buyers, editors, and influencers into a space that felt more like an art gallery than a runway, where models moved slowly, deliberately, allowing the garments to speak without distraction, and the reaction was electric, conversations hushed not out of obligation but genuine awe, critics scribbling notes furiously, and when Katie stepped forward at the end, not to bask in applause but to thank her team by name, there were tears among them because recognition when sincere is a powerful thing, and in the days that followed, orders poured in beyond even their most optimistic projections, forcing rapid decisions about scaling production without sacrificing ethics, and once again Katie led with balance, expanding carefully, partnering with manufacturers who shared their principles, and turning down lucrative shortcuts that didn't align with the brand's soul, and as success solidified, so did the realization that this wasn't just a startup anymore, it was the foundation of a true fashion empire, one built not on ego or legacy alone but on collaboration, accountability, and heart. And when Brooke finally sat down with Katie one quiet evening, admitting how proud she was and how humbling it felt to watch her sister step into this power so fully, Katie smiled softly, reminding her that there was room for all of them to shine, that success didn't have to come at the expense of love or family, and in that moment, surrounded by sketches, fabric swatches, and the hum of a city that never stops dreaming, Katie Logan understood that the greatest triumph wasn't the headlines or the profits or even the influence she was beginning to wield. It was the knowledge that she had built something true, something lasting, and something entirely her own, and as the future stretched out before her, filled with inevitable challenges, competition, and growth, she felt ready, grounded, and fiercely hopeful, because this fashion empire hadn't begun with a desire to conquer, but with a simple, powerful choice to believe in herself, and that belief, once awakened, proved unstoppable. The morning air at Forrester Creations was unusually crisp, carrying with it the faint scent of fresh coffee and polished wood, a comforting aroma that should have signaled the start of a regular day. But for Katie, today was anything but ordinary. She had spent months planning, negotiating, and quietly strategizing, and finally the moment had arrived. She was on the verge of launching her very own fashion company, a venture she had dreamed about since she first walked through the glass doors of Forrester Creations as a young woman eager to learn about the world of fashion. Katie's mind buzzed with excitement and a hint of nervousness, the kind that makes your stomach flutter and your palms slightly clammy, a reminder that every big decision carries its weight. Today she was no longer just a part of the Forrester legacy. She was stepping into the world on her own terms, armed with experience, creativity, and an unshakable determination to make her mark. Katie strode down the familiar hallway with purposeful steps, her heels clicking against the marble floor, echoing through the office like a subtle declaration of intent. She glanced at the portraits lining the walls, icons of Forrester's past triumphs, capturing the legacy of a family that had built an empire out of vision and dedication. Yet, even amidst the legacy of her husband's family, Katie felt the pull of independence, the urge to create something uniquely her own, and she was determined not to let hesitation or doubt get in her way. Today she wasn't merely a supporter of fashion. She was about to become a leader, a force to be reckoned with in an industry that demanded resilience, creativity, and relentless ambition. In her office, Katie had set up a large table covered with sketches, fabric samples, mood boards, and laptops displaying prospective designers' portfolios. Each piece was a testament to countless hours of research, late nights scrutinizing the work of young and experienced designers alike, and delicate negotiations to bring the best talent on board. She ran her fingers over a delicate silk swatch, imagining how it might flow in a gown that could be worn on the runway of Paris Fashion Week. The thought made her heart race with anticipation, but also a twinge of anxiety. Could she really pull this off? Could she convince these top designers to leave their comfort zones and take a chance on a brand still in its infancy? One that carried her name and her vision? Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her reverie. It was a text from Forrester, her trusted friend and one of the few people who had seen her struggle and triumph over the years. "Katie, you're going to kill it today. I can feel it. Let me know when the first designer meeting starts. I want to cheer you on." A smile tugged at her lips. Zend had always been a grounding presence, someone who reminded her that she wasn't alone, even in moments that demanded total independence. She quickly typed a reply, a simple, confident, "Thank you. You'll see. Today is the beginning of something extraordinary." The first designer to arrive was an old friend, someone Katie had admired from afar for years. As he stepped into the office, he radiated creativity and confidence, his designer's hands almost twitching as he examined the sketches and fabrics on the table. Katie greeted him warmly, and they quickly fell into a deep conversation about vision, aesthetics, and the kind of clothing that could challenge norms while still appealing to a broad audience. Ideas bounced across the room like sparks, igniting an energy that made Katie's chest swell with excitement. This was more than a meeting. It was the start of a collaboration that could redefine her place in the fashion world. One by one, the designers arrived. Some were young and hungry for recognition, while others were established names seeking a fresh challenge. Each conversation was a delicate dance of persuasion, reassurance, and shared ambition. Katie listened intently, her sharp mind absorbing details about design philosophies, production techniques, and market trends. She offered insights, shared anecdotes from her years in the industry, and slowly, the room began to transform from a formal office into a vibrant creative hub buzzing with possibility. As the meetings progressed, Katie's phone continued to buzz with notifications, emails from potential investors, updates from the marketing team, and reminders about press releases she had drafted weeks ago. The logistics were daunting, but she felt a thrill at the thought of orchestrating something so ambitious. Every detail mattered. The names of designers, the choice of fabrics, the color palette for the launch collection, the timing of social media announcements, even the design of the office space itself, which she envisioned as a blend of sophistication and warmth, a place that could inspire creativity while making clients feel instantly at ease. Despite the whirlwind of activity, Katie never lost her composure. She had learned from years of navigating boardroom tensions and industry politics that confidence was contagious. Her calm, assured presence reassured the designers, many of whom had experienced the cutthroat side of fashion. They respected her not only for her knowledge but also for the sincerity with which she approached the project. This wasn't just about business. It was about building something meaningful, a fashion house that could tell stories, evoke emotions, and leave a lasting imprint on the industry. Meanwhile, news of Katie's venture began to spread quietly but swiftly. Gossip traveled faster than any press release could, fueled by curiosity and intrigue. Within hours, other Forrester Creations employees caught wind of the initiative. Some were supportive, offering congratulations and words of encouragement, while others viewed it as a threat, a challenge to the family's established dominance in the fashion world. Katie was aware of the whispers but chose to focus on the task at hand. She knew that fear and skepticism were natural reactions when someone dared to step out of the familiar, and she was prepared to prove that her vision was not only viable but revolutionary. In the afternoon, Katie scheduled a brainstorming session with her core team. They gathered around a large table, laptops open, notebooks filled with scribbles and sketches. The energy was palpable. Every idea, no matter how daring or unconventional, was welcomed and examined with curiosity and enthusiasm. Katie facilitated the discussion, guiding the team with a balance of authority and collaboration. She asked questions that challenged assumptions, encouraged exploration of new concepts, and ensured that everyone felt heard. The atmosphere was electric, a perfect blend of focus, creativity, and excitement that made her heart race. By late afternoon, a plan had begun to take shape. Katie and her team had outlined the structure of the new company, identified key designers and collaborators, and sketched a preliminary roadmap for the launch. She felt a surge of pride, not just in the work that had been accomplished, but in the team she had assembled. These were people who shared her passion, believed in her vision, and were willing to take risks to make it a reality. For the first time in her career, Katie felt an overwhelming sense of autonomy, a realization that she was no longer navigating someone else's legacy, but actively creating her own. As the sun began to dip below the skyline, casting golden rays across the office, Katie took a moment to reflect. The journey ahead was daunting. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but she felt ready. She had resources, talent, and most importantly, an unshakable belief in her own capabilities. The dream she had nurtured for years was finally within reach. And in that quiet moment, as the office buzzed with the final preparations of the day, Katie allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The fashion empire was no longer just a dream. It was beginning to take shape, and she was at the helm. Later that evening, as Katie left the office, she paused to take one last look at the building that had been both a home and a proving ground for so many years. The glass doors reflected her image, and for a brief moment, she saw not just the woman who had walked these halls for years, but a visionary ready to make her mark. She knew there would be obstacles, the competitive nature of the industry, the skepticism of established power players, and the pressure of maintaining excellence. But she also knew she had the determination and ingenuity to overcome them. Back at her apartment, Katie spread out the sketches and notes from the day on her dining table, turning the space into a temporary command center. She reviewed her schedule for the coming weeks, noting meetings with potential investors, photo shoots, and designer consultations. Each task was a piece of the larger puzzle, and she relished the challenge of weaving them together into a coherent and compelling narrative for her new brand. As the night deepened, Katie felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her mind raced with ideas, possibilities, and contingencies. She knew sleep would be fleeting, but she welcomed it. Dreams were waiting, and she intended to chase them with every ounce of energy she had. The fashion world was about to see something extraordinary, and Katie intended to be at the center of it all. By the next morning, news of Katie's venture had reached the media, and reporters were calling with questions, eager to get a glimpse into the mind of the woman who dared to challenge industry norms. Interviews were scheduled, press releases drafted, and social media strategies mapped out. Katie handled it all with the same poise and clarity that had guided her throughout the day before. She answered questions thoughtfully, emphasizing not just the ambition of her new company, but the creativity, innovation, and passion driving it. Through it all, Katie's focus remained unwavering. She knew that the launch of her company would be more than just a business event. It would be a statement, a declaration that she was not defined by her past or by the shadow of others, but by her own vision, talent, and determination. The designers, the team, and even the world were watching, and Katie was ready to show them what she could accomplish. In the weeks that followed, the energy around Katie's company only grew. Designers collaborated closely, experimenting with fabrics, textures, and cuts. Marketing teams created campaigns that highlighted the uniqueness of the brand, while honoring Katie's personal aesthetic. Investors expressed excitement at the innovation and professionalism displayed at every meeting. And through it all, Katie remained at the center, guiding, motivating, and inspiring those around her. The first runway show was scheduled to coincide with a major fashion week, a bold move that reflected Katie's confidence in her team and in herself. Invitations were sent, models were cast, and the city buzzed with anticipation. Katie spent late nights reviewing every detail, ensuring that each garment, accessory, and visual element perfectly conveyed the story she wanted to tell. It was a culmination of months of hard work, risk-taking, and relentless pursuit of a dream, and she was determined to make it unforgettable. On the night of the show, the venue was filled with industry elites, media representatives, and fashion enthusiasts, all eager to witness the debut of Katie's brand. The lights dimmed and the first models stepped onto the runway, clad in designs that were bold, innovative, and unmistakably Katie. The audience reacted with awe and admiration, applauding the creativity and vision that had brought these pieces to life. Katie stood backstage, heart pounding yet calm and composed, knowing that this was the moment she had been preparing for her entire life. As the show concluded and the final applause echoed through the venue, Katie allowed herself a small, victorious smile. She had done it. Against odds, skepticism, and the ever-present challenges of the fashion world, she had launched her empire. And while the journey was only beginning, Katie knew that her vision, determination, and passion would continue to propel her to new heights, shaping not just her company, but the future of fashion itself. The world had taken notice, and Katie was ready to lead.